Hi, welcome. In this video, I'm going to talk about the transition that we need to make in the early fourth grade from working with crayons to working with colored pencils. Some teachers may choose to do this transition earlier, say in the third grade, the middle to late third grade. Some people will wait until fourth grade, and some even wait until the fifth grade. It's really up to you and your own desires, where you feel the children are in their drawing work, whether you want to push them a little bit further in their crayon work, or whether you want to get them started on working with colored pencils. There really isn't any set rule. It's important, though, that you make the transition with some consciousness yourself and to understand why you're doing it. We also want to recognize that when we transition to colored pencils, that we're not saying no to crayons. Block crayons have such a beautiful quality about them, and if you say that the children are growing out of their crayons and they no longer have to use them, it can in some ways harden them against crayon work, and crayons are really such an incredible material to use. There is an opportunity for them to use both together, crayons and pencils. So it shouldn't be an either or, but a both. And what I want to do is to present to you a technique that will help you to transition the children into using the colored pencils in the same way that they use the colored block crayons. So if we were to look at the block crayons themselves, we have a whole solid edge of color, so that when we are drawing on the paper, we're able to lay out a full shape of color. And depending on how much pressure we use, we can bring darkness and value into the qualities of the color. If you turn the crayon, of course we know this, if you turn the crayon in different ways, you can get more directed, sharper, linear quality in your color, or more broadened, open, spaced color, depending on how you hold and use the crayon. And hopefully in the years that you've been working with crayon with your students, you've given them a whole variety of tools and approaches for using color with the crayon. When we transition into using the colored pencil, though, our surface of color is very narrow and therefore requires a little bit more eye-hand coordination, and it also requires a whole lot more attention. One of the reasons why originally there was this idea that pencils shouldn't be introduced in the early grades is because it requires a certain focus and attention that is awakening. It causes the children to come out of a dreamy, imaginative experience of color and into this very abstract understanding of line. And we know if we look at the world that lines actually don't exist. Lines themselves are the two colors touching each other, and they create an apparent line. So when two colors come together, and they bump into each other, you're creating an apparent line where these two forms of color meet. If we're looking at anything, so here we have this crayon on the paper, and where the crayon color matches the color, meets the color of the paper, that can also be abstracted. You can, in your concepts, you can create a line around the edge of this crayon. You could also create a line around the edge of the shadow. And the tool that we would use is the pencil to do that. So in the way that we're asking children to work with color here through form rather than line, when we introduce the pencils, we also want them to work with form instead of line. We don't want them to leap into making only outlines, only designating the outer edges of things, but to still maintain their relationship to the inner colors and the inner shapes and the wholeness of an object rather than just its edges. So when the children work with a pencil, they will go very easily into drawing lines and shapes. We use a pencil when we're forming our letters and our numbers, and therefore this drawing lines is very easy for them to do. But what we want to do when we introduce the pencil is we want to encourage them and actually push them in the direction to use the pencil to create form. And so the first step of building form is to recognize that it comes from a series of lines that are drawn very close together. And this is what we call the slant line drawing technique. When we introduce it to the children, we want to recognize that whether they're left-handed or right-handed, if they're holding the pencil in the correct way, making marks on the paper has a level of comfort by using the wrist in this way, where it's just a casual going back and forth. And so you would have the children just draw slanted lines on the paper in a relaxed way. And you can say, these are your slant lines. If they were left-handed, it would be the same. So their lines would just go in the other direction. So these slant lines, you want to train the children. You want them to grow into using them in such a way that they can create shapes and forms to illustrate their stories and their imagination. So when I first work with the students, I'm working very carefully where the lines will go into a specific shape or form. So here we have a diamond shape. What happens if we want to do a circle shape? We have to pay a little bit more attention. We have to imagine the circular shape and not draw the outline, but see if the circle can grow out of the center, and maybe using smaller and shorter lines, we have our circle grow into its shape. We want to use perhaps a square, and that maybe the lines go up and down. So changing the gesture in our hand, we can make a square. So at first, the children might have trouble with this, and they have to practice. You might also work with the pressure, because if the students are drawing very hard, they're going to see their lines. If they're drawing very soft, they're easier to blend together. So your final product, your final drawing, the form that you make is going to be more evenly colored. So you have pressure, direction, and you have proximity, right? How close are your lines next to each other? So proximity. Right? So the children will come to first make their lines far apart, and it will take some time. You also want to make sure they're not doing this at first, that there's actually a gesture where they come to the end of the line and they pick up their pencil before they draw the next line. Right? So you want to talk about gesture. What is the gesture that they're making? So they all go in the same direction. They have the same amount of pressure or not. Sometimes you want it to get from light to dark. And then you want to talk about proximity, because here they're further apart. Here they're closer together. And then you want to talk about gesture. How long are the lines? How short are the lines? When you introduce this to your students, you can give them a piece of paper like this and have them try things out. Use it as an art period where they are given opportunities to really practice. They can also hold the pencil in a little bit of a different way and be able to shade in this way. If they're holding the pencil in this way, they're going to have more of a gesture that's a back and forth gesture. Back and forth. Because they're not pushing too hard. They're using the side, just as they would use the side of the crayon, going back and forth as a shading. Right? And again, you want to try to keep them from drawing these lines, because what will happen is if they draw a line, their pressure is going to be much stronger than any filling in that they might do. So if we filled it in, I'm going to have to push really hard to match the pressure that I used when I drew the outline. So it would be better to start in the middle and have the form grow out in this way to become the form that I want it to be, or to grow out into the shape that I want it to be. Growing a little bit bigger on all the different sides till it's the shape that I want it to be. So here are some ideas. So we're working with the pencil. We want to have the children have experiences of different kinds of pressure. We want the children to understand that their lines, that their slant lines should go in this same direction so that it's easy and gentle on the wrist. When the children get older and you want to do cross-hatching or other techniques for shading, then the direction will change. But you don't want to give them too many things to think about at first. So here, let's have all the lines go in the same direction. Want to think about how close together our lines are and what that creates in our image. So do we want to create light? This, when the lines are further apart from each other, there's a greater sense of lightness than if the lines are very close together. And then we want to talk about gesture. So are the lines going straight in the same direction, or are they zigzagging, or are they curving, right? So there's a lot that can be done if you change the gesture, right? So have the children practice some of those things as you introduce your pencil work. Okay, so here I'd like to suggest an activity that you can do with your students. Here you can see is a really nice diagram, and I want to thank Live Education for creating this beautiful diagram. You can see at the top are these three archetypal forms: the circle, the triangle, and the square. And if you're doing this activity with the students, this sort of introductory activity where you're introducing the pencil and how you want to use the pencil in their drawing work, you can actually have them start with using these techniques here to create a circle, a triangle, and a square. And then you want to think about it, that all the things in the world are coming or originate in some ways from these three forms. And as the children become more observant in the 3rd grade and the 4th grade, that they are able to experience or identify or isolate in the natural world these shapes and forms. But we also know that they can be metamorphosed into new shapes. We can change them by pushing them or stretching them or pinching them or bending them so that they become other kinds of shapes that we can use for drawing plants, animals, and human figures. So in an activity that you might want to do, just to sort of isolate this drawing process, you can use an extra main lesson or an art class. If you have something like a painting lesson, you could have a drawing lesson in your painting period where you focus on helping the children to see these different shapes and create them themselves. They could create a chart like this if they wanted to, if you want to do something like that with your class, or you could actually just have them transform these three forms into these other forms. Because then once they have these in their experience, they can then use them for drawing the animals, especially in the 4th grade when you do the human being and the animal class, your main lesson work, drawing all these different kinds of animals. They can help themselves and help each other, and you can help them to find and isolate these different forms within the bodies and the shapes of the animals so that they can draw them more effectively. So the circle, you can pull it out, it becomes an oval. You can stretch it and make it an egg. You can even pinch it at the bottom to become a teardrop. The triangle can be flattened. It can be pinched and softened around the edges so it has no more corners to become a pear. It can be bent to become a kidney, and then again pinched and extended to become a paisley. The square here can be stretched to be a rectangle and bent to create a bent rectangle, or in some ways like a growing form, a leaning over form. Or it can be a cylinder, which is rounded around the edges so that it can be like a stem or a trunk of a tree. So these are wonderful shapes that you can try. Have the children draw them, and then take them into the next step, which I will go into in a moment, where they begin to look at images of animals or look out into the natural world And similar to first grade, see where are the places that there's the straight line and the curved line, where are places where they see a rectangle or an oval, where are places where they see a kidney shape. It's an unusual shape, but it does exist. It can be isolated in their experiences. So I encourage you to try this, and I'll see you in the next part. Now, the next step you would want to take with the students is more of a joyful, playful time that you can have them try out these shapes that you've introduced them. They've given them a try. They might have a selection of them on a separate sheet of paper. But have them take some time to really think about the animals that they know in the world. And using the different shapes that they've learned about, draw pictures of animals by combining different shapes. So I was thinking about a giraffe. So a giraffe is a long-legged animal that has a very large body, very long neck, and then the head at the top is kind of triangular. So I would want to pick and choose what are the kinds of shapes that I'm going to use for the different parts of the animal to create my giraffe out of my own imagination. So they could be a little silly, a little bit more cartoonish, a little bit more unusually shaped, but it will get the children to begin to be more imaginative about how to use these different forms together. Because as you move forward in your human being and animal block, you're going to ask them to draw pictures of the animals that they learn about. So I will go to the giraffe, but now when I'm just looking at these, what kind of animals could I make out of these things? So here, this one, this little inverted teardrop shape, I'm actually going to make the teardrop shape on its side, lying on the ground. Now these, of course, are techniques that I will have used with the children when we're drawing with a crayon, but now I'm going to do it with a pencil. So I might have a little mouse here, which is my teardrop shape just turned on its side. I was looking at this paisley one, this paisley shape, and this isn't the color of the animal, but this is also a kind of a fun way of working. So I'm going to change the shape of the paisley. I'm going to stretch it out just a little bit. And then I'm going to put a little oval shape here, just a small oval shape at the top of the paisley. And then I'm going to use a different color. I'm going to use a triangle, very narrow triangle. And then I'm going to give it some legs. So here I have a bird, a wading bird. I've got a little fat in the legs, but you get the idea. Maybe we'll make his body a little bit bigger. And then maybe we'll have let's see if he has perhaps a triangle here on the back with his tail feathers. A funny looking bird, right? Fat-legged, funny looking bird. Okay, so what else would we want to do? So maybe we have a turtle, right? So a turtle would be a half circle, perhaps a half oval, using my form, trying to stay with my slant lines. Proximity is very close so that I make a nice solid shape. And then I'm going to have my rectangles for his legs. I might have a triangle for the tail. And then his head will be in some ways like this pear with a head with a neck, right? As he sticks his head out. His neck's a little too long, so let's make his shell a little bit bigger. Right, so here's my turtle. I can give him a little bit of decoration on his top with some forms on the top of his shell. So it gives the children just a little bit of something to try. So I'm going to go to my giraffe here, which I was excited about. And I'm going to have my oval shape for my body. I might have to look at a picture eventually to make it more accurate. But just for this exercise, to have some fun with the kids, I might just have the giraffe oval, and then I have the big long neck, right? Big long neck, and then I have sort of a flattened triangle nose. Right, with his ears. And then giraffes have these horns on the top of their head, right? And then their big, long legs, long rectangles, and their big hoofed feet. So again, I'm not trying to do the outline of the giraffe. I'm trying to find the form and creating the shape with the form. So I'm not drawing the outline, but I'm from the inside to the outside, I create the form, right? So then let's see, we have, oh, here, let's have this. I'm going to turn it on its side and use a different color. I'm going to start there, make my bent rectangle. And then I'm going to have a circle. Might not be a whole perfect circle, but pretty close. And my triangles. And then I have my rectangles and some circles. And then I have another bent rectangle, right? So this one, he might be scaredy cat, right? So all his hair is sticking out. A fraidy cat. So these are different kinds of shapes and forms that you can create with your class. Have this be part of the sort of second stage after you introduce these shapes and forms. you can have them then do some creative drawing and sharing ideas with each other. So everybody will have a chance to create some beautiful animals. So I hope you have fun with this, and we'll see you in the next stage. Okay, so here we come to the last part of this video, and this is our destination. We want to be able to take all of the things that we have looked at and considered when drawing with a colored pencil to actually make a colored pencil drawing. And here is a photograph that I got from the internet. I want to draw a cow, and golly, I don't know how to do it. You know, there are parts of me, I've seen lots of cows. I've milked cows and I've fed cows and I've walked with cows in the field. But when it actually comes time to drawing cows, I need help. I need to have a reference. I need to have something to look at when I'm drawing it. And, you know, some people can draw things out of their imagination. That's just not me. So you can always use references. You can use pictures from a book. You can take pictures yourself. You can go out into the world and sit in the field and draw yourself. But know that we don't always have to draw from memory. That's the important thing. And we want to share that with the children as well. If they don't know how to draw a cow, let's look at pictures of a cow and see what are the components of the cow that we think are important to include, and how do we go about forming and shaping the cow so that it looks like a cow on the paper. So if we take a look at this one and we go back to our archetypal forms, we're going to be looking for these kinds of forms in the form of the cow so that we can reproduce it in our drawings. So here I can see the main form, the main structure of the cow is this beautiful curved shape here. It's kind of like a half an oval. You might even say it's a whole oval, right? With this triangle here on the back. And then there's a triangle here. I also see there's somewhat of a rectangle here for the neck. The chest here comes out and connects. This is sort of a curve, another part of a circle. The head, if you really look at it, including the ears, is like a whole triangle, flattened because the nose has the teeth, which help the cow to eat the grass. We have rectangles of different sizes that come together to create the feet, the legs. The udder is a curve, right? Another half circle or portion of a circle. This poor tail has been broken, so we might want to draw a longer tail on this cow so she has something to hit the flies with. And then we can see that the hoofs are below the surface of the grass. So we can either draw the grass, or we can look at another picture and find the hoofs of the cow, which we know are the cloven hoofs. And they're probably more triangular shaped, and we can include that in our drawing as well. So let's take a minute to just consider on our picture how we want to include this, right? So I'm not going to fill up the whole image. I'm going to make a little cow here. So using my colors, I'm going to first give the cow some place to eat, to stand. So using my slant lines, I'm going to take my time and I'm going to give the cow some grass to stand on. And as you can see, my lines are all going in the same direction. Some are a little stronger than others. But my wrist is always going in the same direction. here's my grassy land. Might have to go over it a couple times to bring the proximity of the lines closer together so there's some overlap. Later, when I bring in some additional details, I might change the direction of my gesture to create some variety in the image, but right now we'll focus on that. So next I'm going to draw my cow, and I'm going to use red just so that we can see it really well. And I'm going to think about the size of the cow. If this is going to be the whole cow from end to end, as you can see here, this half circle part, this half oval, is on, I need to make room for the head here. So if I find the middle, somewhere is like here behind the back leg, so it's a little bit shifted to the side. So I'm not going to go to the line and draw the line. I'm going to kind of grow out the shape of the cow, so that I have, put a little more pressure so you can see what I'm doing, so that I have this oval, half oval shape with the straight back. I'm doing it quite quickly, not so heavily, so that it grows out. It's not, I'm not getting it perfect right at the beginning. And that's something that you can share with your students, is if you recognize that it grows, you can change the shape and form as you go. It doesn't have to be perfect in the first try. And when you go over it, it becomes a little bit darker, a little bit more confident, and you can bring the shape of the cow out carefully. There. So here I have my half oval shape. And I'm going to bring here, now I'm going to go down the legs and have the cow standing on its leg. So this leg kind of goes a little bit towards the front. I have a triangle shape here, right? It's kind of a triangle shape that comes all the way from the back end, coming down, narrowing at the this is actually the ankle, if you can imagine that. The knee is here, is the ankle. It gets a little narrower, grows towards the front, and here's where the hoof will be. So we can put the cloven hoof here. A little bit stronger so you can see where the hoof is, like so. Let's do the back one so it doesn't look like he's falling over. Now, the udder comes around like this. So I'm going to use a little bit lighter color, and I'm going to do the udder, goes behind and pops out here in the back. The teats, like so. There's no line here. You can see it's just the two forms of color bumping into each other. Once I have the whole cow completed, I will go in with strength to bring darknesses and lightnesses, just so we get some definition between the different sections. And because it's light enough, I can overlap those colors and make corrections if needed. Okay, so then let's come up here to the shoulder, and then the neck comes down pretty dramatically. And here the head will begin. So remember we had it was like a triangle. So here's the triangle. With a flattened nose where it's munching. And then these ears, you see the triangle? And then the ears, they come out. They're in some ways a very similar shape to this, right? Straight on the top and curved, straight on the top and curved. So we can do that. Straight on the top and curved. There, look at that. Enjoying her grass. So her neck connects to her chest. So we'll just fill that in. So we can see that. And then let's bring her leg. Now her leg won't come out of here because that's part of her neck. So her shoulder is here. And so her leg will come out a little bit further back. So here, you can see, here's her shoulder. This is part of her neck. If you feel the back of your neck where that bone sticks out in the back of your neck, the sort of top of your spine, it's higher, you can see, than your shoulder. So the cow's shoulder is here, and then the leg comes down. So we want to have the leg come down. And the elbow is here. And then it stands straight on that knee. And the leg. And the hoof. And then we'll have the other. The other leg. And the hoof in the grass. So now I'm going to bring some gesture into the cow so that you can see. Here is the elbow. Here's the knee. And here's the neck. Let's make that neck a little bit clearer. And we can put the eye in. And then here I'm going to actually make the grass just a little bit longer so it looks tasty, nice and tasty for the cow to eat. So we'll bring this a little more darkness into this. Oops. And then I'm going to come back here and do the tail. They like to have a nice long tail so that those flies don't bother them. So like I said, when things don't seem to be going quite right for you, you always have to trust that as you work on it, it will strengthen and find its wholeness. Because as we're working, sometimes things don't look like we want them to until we work on them a little bit more. That's the thing with colored pencil, is that the process can be shifted as you work. So here, let's have his hip bone sticking, her hip bone stick out there, right? Shoulders, there. So now I'm going a little faster and I'm doing a little zigzag back and forth. But as your children become more confident, they too can go more quickly in their drawing. Let's put a little bit of blue sky back here. So when you're doing larger surfaces of color, you can get these overlaps where the color gets stronger. And so you can help the children recognize where those places are, and then they can fill in between those strong lines in order to create a more uniform background colors. Now, one of the things that I learned as I got better with painting as well, and if you've watched some of my painting videos, you will know that for the subject of your picture to feel more a part of the whole, so that there's sort of harmony between the background and the foreground and the object that you're drawing the picture of, you want to bring some of the color from the background into the subject and some of the subject into the background. So let's see how we could do some of that. So I have a little bit of blue here. And what I want to do is be able to bring a little bit of blue into the cow. Just a little bit. So I want to maybe bring some darknesses into these forms in the body. Maybe bring a little darkness into the tail, into the legs, into the knees. Here, bring these ears nice and dark. Now, since my cow is this variety of Holstein cow, right, which has the beautiful black and white spots on it, I could perhaps even make some spots using green and blue to allow for this coloration change. So I could even do something like that. Give my cow some spots. So again, you can see I'm still trying to save and continue with the same gesture in my hand so that the the lines in my image are all most often going all in the same direction, so that they have uniformity in those relationships. So by creating these relationships between the object of our drawing and the background, you can feel already that the cow, it feels like it belongs in this space. We'll put a little darkness here for the faraway leg, shadow underneath. Give those hoofs a little bit of darkness. And then I'm going to bring just a little bit of green here underneath. Maybe some in the feet. Maybe bring out a few of those blades where the cow is munching. Could even add some of this green here in the udder to make it nice and dark underneath, like so. Because that's what happens, right? The grass turns into milk. So there we go. So there's our cow. So thanks for watching. Please feel free to send me a message if you have any questions or would like to do some additional exercises. I'm happy to make some more videos. Just let me know. Alrighty, have a good day. Thanks.